At a major security summit in Singapore in late May of 2025, the United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth delivered a speech that sent shockwaves across Asia and honestly, the world. Hegseth, a military veteran and former television personality known for his strong conservative views, did not mince words. He declared that the United States is now actively preparing for war with China. This statement wasn't presented as a possibility but rather as a necessary action to preserve peace. He framed China as a clear and present threat, suggesting that a potential conflict, especially over the island of Taiwan, could be imminent. This was a stark departure from the more diplomatic language often used at such high-level international gatherings. Hegseth's background provides crucial context for his aggressive stance. Having served in the military in Iraq and Afghanistan and authored books framing American foreign policy in terms of a crusade, his appointment to Secretary of Defense signaled a more hawkish direction for the Trump administration. He has long viewed China not just as a competitor, but as an adversary actively building a military with the express purpose of defeating the United States and achieving what he calls global domination. His speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue was really the culmination of this worldview, transforming his long-held opinions into official U.S. policy and putting the entire Asia-Pacific region on high alert for what might come next. When Hegseth says the U.S. is preparing for war, it means more than just words. It signifies a fundamental reorientation of American military strategy and resources. The focus is shifting away from past conflicts and toward what the Pentagon now sees as its primary challenge: deterring perceived aggression from Communist China. This involves Media Group, U.S. Navy ships deploying in Pacific region, military transport aircraft loading troops at stock at distribute_equally, moving more ships, planes and troops into the Pacific region, conducting more frequent and complex military exercises with allies, and developing new weapon systems specifically designed to counter China's growing military capabilities. It's a comprehensive effort to demonstrate that the United States is ready and willing to engage in a conflict to protect its interests and allies in Asia. This aggressive posture is not entirely new, though Hegseth has amplified it considerably. Even the previous Biden administration identified China as the main strategic challenge, with officials like Antony Blinken outlining policies to shape the strategic environment around Beijing. This shows a rare bipartisan consensus in Washington that China's rise must be managed and contained. However, Hegseth's rhetoric is far more direct and confrontational. He has removed the diplomatic veil, openly discussing war plans and presenting the situation as an urgent crisis. This shift from strategic competition to explicit war preparation marks a dangerous new phase in the relationship between the world's two most powerful nations. A central element of Secretary Hegseth's strategy is to force nations in the Asia-Pacific to make a definitive choice. During his speech, he made it clear that countries could no longer walk a middle path, benefiting from economic partnerships with China while relying on security guarantees from the United States. This "you are with us or against us" approach is a direct challenge to the delicate balancing act that many Asian nations have maintained for decades. The U.S. is actively trying to build what it calls an anti-China coalition, and Hegseth's declaration was a clear signal that the time for neutrality is over. This pressure campaign began even before the summit, with visits to key allies like Japan and the Philippines to discuss concrete warfighting preparations. The dilemma for many countries in the region is profound and deeply rooted in their economic realities. China is not just a distant trading partner, it is the economic engine of Asia. For nations like Vietnam, Malaysia, and even close U.S. allies like South Korea, China is their largest trading partner, a major source of investment, and a critical link in their supply chains. The idea of severing or significantly reducing these economic ties, as Washington is pressuring them to do, is daunting. Doing so could trigger severe economic downturns, disrupt industries, and cause widespread unemployment, a price that many governments are unwilling or unable to pay for aligning with the United States. On the other hand, the United States has long played the role of the region's primary security provider. Since the end of World War II, the American military presence, its naval fleets, air bases, and troops, has been seen by many as a stabilizing force. Countries with territorial disputes with China, particularly in the South China Sea, look to the U.S. as a powerful counterbalance. This American security umbrella gives smaller nations the confidence to stand up to Beijing's influence. Hegseth's strategy aims to leverage this security dependence, essentially telling these countries that they must risk their economic prosperity with China to continue receiving protection from America. This high-pressure campaign has so far yielded limited success for Washington. Despite the intense diplomatic efforts and public declarations, most regional countries have shown a strong reluctance to be drawn into a new Cold War. They are wary of becoming a battleground for a great power conflict between the United States and China. Their leaders understand that choosing a side would not only destabilize their economies, but could also create deep political divisions within their own societies. As a result, many are quietly resisting the American push, hoping to navigate the treacherous waters between the two giants without being forced to abandon one for the other. Both the United States and China publicly claim that their ultimate goal is to maintain peace and stability in Asia. Chinese officials consistently state that their country's rise is peaceful, and that they oppose the idea of any single nation dominating the region, a principle enshrined in their foreign policy for decades. They point to treaties signed in the 1970s with both the US and Japan that include clauses against seeking hegemony. From Beijing's perspective, its military modernization is a defensive measure, necessary to protect its own sovereignty and economic interests in a region where the US has long been the dominant military power. They argue that it is Washington, not Beijing, that is creating instability with its aggressive actions. In sharp contrast, the United States views its own dominance as essential for regional peace. This idea was formally outlined in the 1992 Wolfowitz Doctrine, which stated that a key U.S. objective was to prevent any rival power from emerging to challenge its supremacy in critical regions like East Asia. From this viewpoint, China's growing economic and military strength is inherently a threat to the existing order that has, in Washington's eyes, kept the peace for over half a century. Secretary Hegseth's accusations that China seeks regional hegemony are a direct reflection of this long-standing American policy, framing U.S. actions as a necessary defense of a free and open international system. This fundamental clash of perspectives creates a dangerous dynamic where both sides see themselves as acting defensively while viewing the other as the aggressor. China sees American warships in the South China Sea as a provocation, while the U.S. sees China's construction of military bases on disputed islands as an act of aggression. This cycle of action and reaction fuels a growing arms race in the region. As the U.S. sends more military assets to the Pacific, China accelerates its own military programs to counter them. This competition for influence and military superiority makes the entire region more volatile and increases the risk of a miscalculation or accident spiraling into a full-blown conflict. For the other countries in Asia, this escalating rivalry is a nightmare scenario. They are caught in the middle of a struggle between their most important economic partner and their most critical security ally. The constant military posturing and hostile rhetoric from both Washington and Beijing create an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear. The peace that has enabled decades of unprecedented economic growth now feels incredibly fragile. Regional leaders are constantly trying to navigate the growing tensions, but as the two superpowers drift further apart, the space for neutrality and diplomacy continues to shrink, leaving the future of Asia hanging in the balance. Despite Secretary Hegseth's powerful rhetoric about confronting China, the actions of the U.S. government sometimes tell a different story. In a surprising move in June of 2025, just as the focus on Asia was supposed to be intensifying, the Pentagon quietly shifted significant military resources away from the Pacific. A second aircraft carrier strike group, one of the most powerful symbols of American military might, was redeployed to the Middle East. This decision was made to address a growing crisis between Iran and Israel. This diversion of critical assets raised serious questions within Washington about whether the U.S. was truly committed to its all-in strategy on China, or if it was being pulled in too many directions at once. This move has highlighted a deep-seated debate within the Pentagon itself. On one side are officials like Hegseth and his key policy chief, Elbridge Colby, who have long argued that the U.S. must single-mindedly focus its military power on China, which they see as the only long-term existential threat. They believe that diverting resources to other regions, no matter how urgent the crisis may seem, dangerously undermines the effort to deter Beijing. They warn that showing a lack of focus in the Pacific could be interpreted by China as a sign of weakness, or a lack of resolve, potentially inviting the very aggression the US is trying to prevent. On the other side of the debate are military commanders like CENTCOM Chief General Eric Kurilla, who are responsible for managing immediate crises in other parts of the world. General Kurilla, who has been given significant autonomy by Hegseth to handle the Iran situation, has successfully argued for more resources to be sent to his theater of operations. This has created friction with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, who shares the concern that the military is being stretched too thin. The empowerment of a hawkish general focused on the Middle East seems to contradict Hegseth's stated goal of prioritizing the Pacific, revealing a government struggling with competing priorities. Ultimately, this internal division showcases the immense challenge the United States faces in trying to maintain its status as a global superpower. While officials declare China to be the #1 priority, real-world events in other regions constantly demand attention and resources. This split focus not only complicates military planning but also sends mixed signals to both allies and adversaries. For countries in Asia being pressured to confront China, the sight of American assets sailing away from their shores toward the Middle East can be unsettling. It suggests that when push comes to shove, Washington's attention might not be as undivided as its leaders claim, further complicating the already precarious quest for peace and stability in the region.